Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third of Wolfson's 50th anniversary lectures. It's my duty tonight, very pleasant duty, to welcome tonight's lecturer, Lord Stevens of Kirkwhelpington. He has served as Britain's most senior police officer and is a holder of the Queen's Police Medal. He has a long and happy connection with this college and is now one of our Honorary Fellows. As Sir John Stevens, he was Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Service from 2000 until 2005. Before that, he was Chief Constable of Northumbria Police and then one of Her Majesty's Inspectors of Constabulary. John Stevens presided over one of the most important police inquiries in recent British history, an inquiry into allegations of collusion in Northern Ireland between the British Army, the Royal Ulster Constabulary and Loyalist terrorists in the murders of Irish nationalists. His third report, he did 3 reports, published in April 2003, upheld the claim and concluded that collusion leading to the murder of nationalists and some unionists wrongly thought to be Catholic or nationalist had taken place. After his retirement as Commissioner, he was created a life peer as Baron Stevens of Kirkwhelpington in the county of Northumberland. But he seems to have been as busy in, quotes, retirement, unquotes, as he ever was in office. For example, he headed the Metropolitan Police Inquiry into the deaths of Diana, Princess of Wales and Dodi Fayed, which reported its findings in December 2006. In June 2007, Prime Minister Gordon Brown appointed him as his senior advisor on international security issues. Brown's successor, David Cameron, then appointed Lord Stevens as chair of the Borders Policing Committee, a position he held for 9 months, focusing on the reorganisation and policing of the United Kingdom's borders. And then, in 2011, he was appointed by Yvette Cooper, MP, the Shadow Secretary of State for Home Affairs, to chair an independent commission into the future of policing in England and Wales, to which we can only say, retirement? Some retirement. It's very nice to have him back in college, so please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, John. It's an absolute delight to be back at Wolfson. My mind goes back to my first introduction to Wolfson, 25 years ago as Deputy Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire, being interviewed by Jack King. What an experience that was. Managed to get the job and he became a really close personal friend over the years. And it's very hard not to walk around Wolfson and see his face, smell the champagne, hear his jokes and realise, yes, Wolfson is part of his creation. Now, it's a very nice introduction, so I actually decided to take you into a lot of confidence into how I find myself up here this evening. Well, John decided to invite a distinguished ex-policeman, decided to invite the most intelligent ex-policeman, so approached that individual, and that individual turned him down. And he went back to the committee and decided to approach the most knowledgeable ex-policeman that he could come across. Approached that person. Again, he turned him down. He then decided to approach the best-looking ex-policeman that he knew. Well, ladies and gentlemen, having been approached 3 times, I decided to accept. Chance would be a fine thing. I wish to talk tonight, if I may, about the commission I headed for 2 years. And I will, if I may, go into the detail of who actually was on that commission and talk about its academic input that we had on it. In December 2011, after massive and major calls for a Royal Commission on Policing, which we hadn't had since 1963, the Labour Party decided to appoint me to chair what would be, they thought, a Royal Commission in all but name on the future of policing. Now, it's quite interesting that people in government don't look for Royal Commissions because sometimes they take a long time to report and sometimes they come out with messages which they don't actually agree with. So I was quite interested in doing this work. But from the very beginning, the Deputy Chairman was Professor Jennifer Brown, the Mannheim Professor at the London School of Economics, we decided this was definitely going to be independent. And I can tell you now that Yvette Cooper appointed us, kept her word in that, and at no point in the process over 2 years did she try and influence it in terms of what we were doing. And if you listen to who was on the commission, you can understand why. We had 40 members of the commission. They were leaders in business, including non-executive directors from KPMG, EasyJet. We had the former Independent Review of Terrorism, Lord Carlisle, former head of MI6, former head of the Army, Lord Dannett. We had the patron of the National Victims Association, Baroness Harris, the Lord Chief Justice of Queensland and Australia, community leaders, Pastor Nims, David Robinson, President of Interpol, Lord Archbishop Eames, judicial leaders, peers such as Baroness Hennig, who's in charge of the private security industry regulation. And so it went on. The reason for that was quite simple. There is absolutely no point at all in giving your attention and your work, and indeed your input into something that's going to be rubbished at the end of it as being politically motivated and something that has no real independence. Now, underneath all of these 40 people I've talked about, we went further. We actually involved 27 universities around the world. Harvard, Oxford and Cambridge, of course, and others. We had 31 papers put in from 29 academic institutions into the report. That has been published by Routledge, and I'm now told it's part and parcel of the major work, if you're doing a law degree, in understanding the working of the police in this country and its placing in the world. Now, I've gone on a bit about that, and I make no excuse for doing so. We were absolutely determined that this was going to be independent, and we were independent. Now, there's no secret that the police service faces unprecedented change and deep challenges. Whilst crime levels have been reduced since 1992, and I remember vividly as a Chief Constable in Northumbria, or one or two others, being visited by Michael Howard and then other people, and deciding at that stage, round about that stage, that police could, working in partnership, affect a reduction in crime. To be perfectly frank, up to that date, policing had actually stood back and said, we might not be able to affect crime, bearing in mind socio-economic influences and the influences of business and the like. It was then decided by Michael Howard, who, whether you like him or not, was an outstanding Home Secretary in my view, as was Jack Straw in different ways, that this wasn't good enough. And one or two of us, Paul Condon was another, Ian Kane was another, decided that actually we would try to do something in more of a concerted and technical and intelligent way in partnership with others. And that's exactly where we went. And whilst crime has decreased since 1992 considerably, and I don't think anybody would argue about that, some crimes are not actually registered. Cybercrime, for instance, is massive. And it was interesting when I was giving evidence to Home Affairs Select Committee, in the back were one or two police commissioners and chief constables, and when I said, you know, difficult to actually account for crime, and all of us have been affected by cybercrime in some way. Only myself recently, and I don't want it published in the papers, but no doubt it will be, was actually a victim of someone trying to hack into my bank account only about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I'm sure we all have similar stories to tell. It would also be difficult to deny that the integrity of the police has taken a battering of late as a result of a spate of organised failures and high-profile scandals. And our report sought to pave the way to creating a police service that seemed to be professional, democratically accountable, and, as important as all of that, serving what we referred to as the common good. When the report was launched 14 months ago, I stated that our vision was for a police service that had a social purpose, combining catching offenders with preventative work, promoting and maintaining order in our communities. A service that listens closely to the demands of all while meeting the needs of the most vulnerable and protecting victims of crime. And this is essential in terms of the structure of policing, which I'll be talking about later on, is rooted in local communities whilst possessing the capacity to tackle organised and cross-border crime. That, of course, includes terrorism. The golden thread that is running through our proposals was that the local policing area must be the core unit for fair and effective policing. And the report covered a number of key areas. The relevance of the Pillion Principles to 21st century policing. What did Sir Robert Peel create, remembering those famous words, the police are here for whatever, and he went on to talk in some little depth of that, and it's been the core of British policing since. Does that have any relevance for today? The role and purpose of the police in the 21st century. The importance of effective partnerships in ensuring delivery of effective policing. The need for better democratic governance. The importance of a new deal for those working within the police service. And here you're going to hear of a survey that we undertook, 32,000 police officers, and what they thought. The need to build a better police profession. The need to improve standards and implement structures that can more efficiently remedy misconduct. The issues around the present structure. The need to identify mechanisms to ensure greater efficiencies and more efficient use of resources. All in all, this was no small task. So to the detail. And perhaps it's only right that we should begin with an analysis of what have become the cornerstone of the tradition of British policing, the Pillion Principles. When the Commission analysed those in relation to the criteria of policing in the 21st century, it became increasingly apparent that they had become a product of their time and were on the whole far too general to enable necessary distinction between different visions of policing. Whilst we accept that the Pillion Principles are fundamental to the British Policing Service, as they stand, they are insufficient to articulate a 21st century vision of effective and legitimate policing. We therefore updated the Pillion Principles to provide a coherent, long-term model rooted in the Pillion traditions of British policing, but reflective of the challenges facing the police services here today. With regards to the mission of police, we accepted that this needed to be broad, encompassing crime prevention, as well as the detection of crime, encouraging proactive engagement while retaining a reactive emergency responding capability, contributing to community cohesion while maintaining order, and providing a local focus while safeguarding national security. Now, faced with budgetary constraints and the government's insistence that the police are crime fighters and crime fighters alone, quite an interesting definition, there is a danger of the police being forced to retreat into a discredited model of reactive policing. We, the Commission, advocated for a social justice model of policing that didn't brand the police as just crime fighters. We, the Commission, also insisted this model needed to be enshrined in law, providing necessary consensus to the question of what we expect the police to do. To the Commission, the neighbourhood defined what we perceive to be the key building block of a fair and effective policing model. And it was for this reason that we argued for the protection of visible, locally responsive policing through which public confidence can be bolstered. We consider that a local policing commitment, here in Cambridge, elsewhere in the country, should be made up of a set of national minimum standards and should be introduced following detailed consultation. As a policeman of 43 years standing, I've learnt firsthand. I learnt it here as deputy, and before and since. The enormous value of effective partnerships. The ability of the police service to prevent crime, maintain order, and enforce the law is heavily dependent on the quality of their relationships with other actors and agencies, whether the public, other criminal justice systems bodies, local public services, or partnerships to tackle crime, or the private sector. There is no way you will have an effective delivery of policing in any area of Great Britain without those partnerships working. And of all the lessons I think we've learnt over the last 30 to 40 years in particular, it is that. Yet, with many reports in the media in relation to outsourcing and privatisation, heightening public scepticism, relationships, we believe, are under threat. No more now than ever, the police must build and strengthen key relationships in order to prevent crime and reduce harm in our communities. The Commission recommended a series of practical measures that sought to protect and enhance key crime prevention partnerships. Furthermore, as part of a commitment to strengthening neighbourhood policing, we consider, that's the Commission, that the police and local council should involve ordinary citizens and those in key occupations in dealing with conflict, crime and antisocial behaviour. There are examples of this. In the Metropolitan Police in 2003, each divisional commander at Chief Superintendent rank had an eminent businessman who was there to advise him or her in terms of how they deliver policing in their area. It was an outstanding success. Some of those people who were there are national names who are prepared to give their time for nothing. We believe that, and it's been used in other places other than the Metropolitan Police, that this is an example of good practice. Now, it became increasingly apparent from the evidence that was given to the Commission, and here I must stress that the evidence was given to the Commission in terms of evidence by 7 previous Home Secretaries, numerous members of agencies, people who had interest. We also held public kind of forums with the media, similar to this, and listening to what they had to say. And we came to the conclusion in the Commission that local community safety partnerships are being undermined by cuts to local government and by the shift of focus and budgets to police and crime commissioners. I will have a little bit more to say about police and crime commissioners later. We therefore, the Commission, recommended that the success of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 be built upon, protecting and extending the statutory arrangements that that Act put into place. We, the Commission, also recommended a considerable strengthening of police accountability at the local policing unit, where community safety partnerships generally operate. Now, what is the local policing unit? I remember vividly being Chief Constable of Northumbria and going up to Berwick, which is on the Scottish border, a long, long way from Newcastle. And I used to have to ask permission to go up there from the superintendent. They didn't regard me as their Chief of Police, they regarded him as their Chief of Police. The same thing in Isle of Wight, where I was Assistant Chief Constable. The local superintendent there was the Chief of Police. The Chief Constable, yes, was there, but not with a direct delivery. And I remember vividly taking evidence down in Wales from the Welsh Government and other people. When it was said, and Lord Carlisle was leading on this, he's Welsh, when it was said to Lord Carlisle, we don't care who the Chief Constable is in South Wales or North Wales. We care who the Superintendent or Chief Superintendent is in this area who represents us and we see regularly. Having been a Chief Constable myself and a Commissioner, I couldn't quite agree with that, of course. Had a zone of truth in it without any doubt at all. Now, we, the Commission, cannot emphasise enough just how important police relationships with the private sector are, especially during this period of economic austerity. And having been out of the police service for 10 years and chaired various companies, worked with some people who are national names on boards, there is immense amount we can learn from the private sector. The thing that has hit me over the last 10 years is this: how easy it is to make a decision in a private company, especially if it's a non-public one, like Travelex or LGC, Government Chemist, Genomics. I've been on their board for 10.5 years, just to mention a few. You can make a decision on a board just like that. Do something with staff, put resources here, put resources there. You cannot do that as Commissioner of Metropolitan Police. I worked out as Commissioner, I was responsible for reporting to 128 different agencies at the same time. From the police authority to the mayor to the inspectorate, and it went on and on. What we are saying is that lessons of best practice in the private sector can be brought forward and pushed into the police service. The police service will probably be resistant to that, maybe less now, because we all know there have to be cuts. However, the relationship and entwining between the police service, the public sector and the private sector must be coherent and principled. Attending to what the private sector can do more effectively deliver and the limits of private sector involvement in police work. To this end, we sent out principles which we believe should govern the police relationship with the private sector. There's some dangerous developments occurring about 4 or 5 years ago, when it was decided the private sector should be brought straight into the police service. And we analysed one police service where 53% of the service that police service was going to give was going to be given through the private sector. Now, if the public want that, fair enough, but the private sector does not have the discipline and the training and the accountability that the police service has. So some of these things have to be sought out, and we looked at that in detail, and recommendations are in the Commission report. Now, online crime is an increasing threat, and after speaking with experts in the field, the Commission acknowledged that the UK needed a combination of a police and third-party agency to act as a portal for the reporting of online crime, as an analytic filter of those reports and as a distributor to single points of contact in each force or the National Crime Agency. We recommended that work would be taken forward to develop such a third-party agency supported by industry, banking and the corporate social responsibility from affected businesses in this area. We thought that would work. One of our terms of reference was to identify the most effective model by which the police could be held to account. Something very close to our hearts and something which is really topical at the present time. Our findings noted that in its present form, the Police and Crime Commissioner model was not the most effective option, with mounting evidence highlighting serious problems in terms of how they are operating on the ground and the lack of public knowledge of or support role for their activities, for their role and activities. Evidence given to the Commission said this, and I was lucky enough to interview some of them myself and see them, and some are doing a good job. But they're doing a good job with a failed model. The key reasons we say that this is the following. The elections and turnout. Overall were 15%. You've had recent examples, I think, where it went down to 9 or 8% recently. Composition. I'm not criticising people who have taken up these positions, but this is what the Commission said. That they're male, white and middle-aged. 8 are former officers or former members of the police. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, would I? Only 6 were women. And how about this? Not one of the PCCs at the time we did the Commission comes from an ethnic or minority background. The third reason is the invisibility. We did a poll, an independent poll, and only 10% of people could actually name their PCC in their area. Fourth, the appointment of staff. I don't want to go too much into this, but there was some quite difficult stories given to us about cronyism and the appointment of people to be paid £65,000 a year, where the proper processes of appointment through personnel appointment had not taken place. Sometimes the relationships with the Chief Constable were difficult. An example of that was Lincolnshire, just up the road, where, if you remember, the Chief Constable was suspended. It went to the High Court, and I don't want to talk about what the judgment was, but it was said that the suspension of the Chief Constable was perverse. There are other examples of that which have not gone to court. And then, more importantly for me personally, and it is my personal opinion on this, not the Commission's, although they agreed with it, some of them, was the scope and the role size of the constituency that the Police and Crime Commissioner represents. Here in Cambridgeshire, and having been deputy here for a couple of years, know the county well, perhaps it would work, but there are differences between Peterborough and Cambridge, aren't there? One or two. Came across a few when I was here. Take it from me, in Northumbria, 4th or 5th largest force in the country, the big metropolitan makeup of Tyne and Wear as it was, Gateshead, Sunderland, Newcastle, compared with Northumberland, where I live at the moment, is totally different. And the representation that you can give as Police and Crime Commissioner, we have a particularly talented one up there, although I can't vote and won't be voting for us, being apolitical and a member of the House of Lords. It's impossible, surely, to deliver all of that from the top of near the Scottish border right the way down to the bottom of Tyne and Wear. Can't be done. We recommended, therefore, that genuine local structures of accountability be introduced. We therefore proposed options for change. Our option preferred was a decision-making over policing to be evolved further, given greater powers to lower tier authorities, down to the district level. This mechanism would then feed into the force-level policing board, which we'd create, comprising of leaders at each local authority within the police force. These boards would be given the power to set the overall budget for the police force area, appoint and dismiss the Chief Constable, and formulate and agree with the Chief Constable a force-level policing plan, setting out the strategic priorities of that particular local force. We also wanted to see a far greater local community participation in decision-making, and push for police forces to establish what we call participatory budgeting units. It's a similar thing which they use in the States and Canada. We think that these initiatives would be effective at getting communities engaged in local initiatives, and we believe there would be no reason why this could not be mirrored in policing through giving the community an opportunity to have a say on the allocation of local policing resources. Now, both parties and other parties are working up the manifesto, but I can tell you now that the manifesto for the Labour Party will be based on this commission. And one of the issues that's going to come out is the Lib Dems and the Labour Party are looking for the abolition of police and crime commissioners. The Tories in no way will do that, because it's a flag, it's one of the major parts of what they brought in when they came into power. But something needs to be done in broadening. There may well be a halfway house. My own view is elected police commissioners have let the genie out of the bag. However, the public kind of interest is very low. But if you surrounded the police commissioner with a proper structure, which I'm talking about, it would allow that person to be far more effective and have less pressure on them, and also allow it to be more accountable and democratic. Now, we did biggest survey through the Federation of policing, of police officers that's ever taken place. 32,000 police officers responded to this, and we found the morale of the police service was at the lowest it ever has. I haven't time to go through the figures, but if you look at the report, they're in them. Something had to be done and has to be done to offer police officers in this country a new deal that combines reform of pay and conditions with a serious and sustained effort to give police officers a greater say in the decisions that affect their working lives. There was great criticism of the leadership of the police service. There was incredible resentment to government attitudes to the service, and I don't want to go into that at the present time, not with elections due. Something has to be done in relation to it. We think, it's a commission, that we can implement models of working which embed fairness for all. In the routine operation of police organisations, we believe it would be possible to ensure that members of the service are treated as partners in reform rather than the objectives of reform. We, the Commission, also recommend that staff with key skills such as crime scene investigators, crime analysis and specialist cybercrime investigators should have a route directly into the police service. Why would you not use and give someone a reasonable rank who's got real professionalism and expertise, say in the area of cybercrime? Bring them in as a chief inspector, superintendent, doesn't worry me. Doesn't worry the Commission, providing, of course, they're given a bedding in to what policing is all about. We have to use these specialist people in the police service at senior level. Another key area of concern for the Commission was the fact that the police have continued to fall short in making themselves representative of the communities they serve. We therefore recommended that greater use was made of the powers within the 2006 and 2010 equalities legislation to try and get more women and employees from ethnic minority backgrounds into the service. Something has to be done. It's talked about that in another 2 years, the ethnic minorities that they're referred to at the moment will no longer be ethnic minorities in London. It will have changed. And yet the police service it represents is not a mirror of that. It seems to us, and it did seem to us, that many of the problems associated with low morale and lack of motivation could be addressed by building up the police service as a profession, something we've talked about for year after year after year. This would promote the police service as a body of practitioners through a process of chartering all those working within the police service. Through this, we could bring meaning and dignity to their work through dedication, self-improvement and ethical commitment. Our vision, and all of these recommendations were unanimous, extraordinary for 40 people and 28 universities. It's extraordinary to get unanimity. I did have hair, but I've lost it since, but we got there. Our vision was for the chartered police officer who would see officers registered with a college of policing, thereby improving public confidence in the system and giving greater competence and status to police officers and staff. Why should a police officer be seen to be less professional than a lawyer, accountant, doctor or teacher? And we stated that we would want to see the police college, the College of Policing, become an authoritative voice of policing and consider that the college's primary lines of accountability should be both to the Home Secretary and to Parliament. I think that is coming about. Now, a spate of organisation failures and scandals over recent years has, without any doubt, damaged public confidence in the integrity of the police. It was extraordinary, though, when we did public surveys to see that the police, in terms of their local acceptability, had a confidence rating of between 63 and 67%. Recently it's gone down to 63%, but it's extraordinary that local policing, bearing in mind some of the damaging inquiries that are going on and some of the damaging stories that are about, have maintained a high level of confidence. That surely is about local policing and core of policing, what type of policing is given by the local communities. However, we found wanting in the existing system, which separates the monitoring of organisation performance from the investigation of police complaints, need for improvement. We believed that there should be a gaining together of both Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Both should be abolished and replaced with a single identity, the Independent Police Standards Commission. This move, we all believed, would help remedy the shortcomings of current arrangements. Take it from me, having investigated corruption, and you've heard about Northern Ireland, when you go into a place like Northern Ireland, suddenly you're pitched into some place where you're investigating what turn out to be 60 to 80 murders and collusion by the security services. When you're trying to get into the intelligence flows and those investigations that have taken place, when you find that there is no place where there's a central data which has pulled this stuff together and you've got no way of doing it, because one system won't talk to another, you really are against it. And for the investigation of things like Hillsborough and other issues, there has to be a central database if complaints have been made by members of the public. It has been said that certain documents have gone missing on inquiries. Subsequently, those documents have been found. And those documents usually have been pushed into a data or in computers, microfished or whatever, and stored somewhere. Why is it we do not have in this country a central database where issues of prime concern, whether there be corruption or where police officers have fallen down or whether there's been sexual kind of activity, that we hold that together in one place, that an investigating officer can go in there and pull that out when he wants to do it? Why is it we don't have an absolute binding together between the Inspector of Constabulary, who goes in and inspects a force, in my day once a year at the very least, who had a great relationship because he went in there and listened to what was going on a 2 to 3 week basis on a structure? Why isn't it that that doesn't bed into the complaints process as well? We think it's not right, and we think that there really is a need for what we would refer to as an independent police standards commission. And the remit of this new agency would cover holding police forces to account for the delivery of standards, dealing with misconduct effectively and efficiently, and ensuring all failings are addressed without delay. We consider that a power to impose an improvement framework akin to consent decrees on forces, where key standards fall well below an acceptable standard, would provide for more active and effective regulation than the current regime, quite frankly, sometimes of largely toothless recommendations. From my own experience in HMI, the recommendations you put in, might be taken on. The only way you could do it was by your own personal influence on the Chief Constable and the fact you're going to come back again a year later and maybe not give them a certificate for effectiveness and efficiency. That's not good enough. We need more than that. We believed also that the College of Policing would have responsibility for managing new professional competence and conduct panels, but the IPSC, which we refer to it as, should have a duty to ensure that they are meeting all the public interests. That's the new Independent Police Standards Commission, the combination of the Inspectorate and also of the Complaints Authority. Furthermore, we went even further. We envisaged that the new body would be a prosecution authority for serious complaints, an appeal body for complaints, and also, if complainants were not satisfied, you could appeal to this body. I and the Commission believe strongly that the relationship between the media and the police must be improved. And we reiterated our desire to see a new media guidelines developed to rebuild the trust and confidence and encourage, rather than restrict, two-way openness and contact. I, amongst others, gave evidence to Leveson. And it was quite interesting in terms of giving evidence and being cross-examined as to where that was going. And I remember vividly someone saying, well, you know, you used to meet up with the editors on a regular basis. Went for lunch with Rebecca Wade, yes. Rebecca Wade, in my diary, 8 times in 5 years or whatever it was. Went to lunch with Max Hastings 16 times. And there was a feeling that this was a wrong thing to do, that these are not people that you should do business with. And I remember vividly saying, and I'll say it to the day I die, these were honourable people. These were people who were trying to do their job. These were people that the police, yes, should have a relationship. Of course, it should not be a close relationship. Of course, it shouldn't be a paid relationship. And of course, it shouldn't be a relationship that in any way involves any kind of corrupt activity. But the police need the media as much as the media need the police. And there have been many examples I've been involved in the 43 years, and I was a career detective before getting to ACPO level, where we had to use the media. And it's only on very rare occasions, I have to tell you, over the course of 43 years and beyond into Diana and beyond into the other things I've been doing, that I have ever been let down by the media, providing you've got a trusted kind of relationship with the person you're dealing with. That does not mean to say You allow him into state secrets or her into state secrets. But you have to have a proper relationship. It does need to be a two-way openness and contact, but there also needs to be a streamlined and minimal requirement to record, but not restrict contact with journalists. So if you're seeing a journalist, record it. What is the reason you're seeing them? When did you see them? Yes, but you don't need to make it a situation where they are treated in a way that you treat criminals or worse. Then we moved on, and this will be interesting, I think, to all of you, to the old issue of structure of policing in this country. It was quite clear from our evidence gathering that very few senior police officers and certainly politicians believe that the structure of 43 separate forces is what they refer to as fit for purpose. The current structure does not deliver efficiency and cost savings. It creates, in the Commission's view, unnecessary duplication and compromises interoperability. In addition, the Commission said, the structure too often obstructs rather than facilitates effective action against cross-force and cross-border crime, which we all know is on the increase. Despite all of this, there's unanimous opinion nearly that this 43 forces is just not fit for purpose. So when we said to people, what is the best alternative arrangements, there was no agreement. In addition, there has been further uncertainty brought about as a result of the introduction of the National Crime Agency and how its relationship with individual police forces will develop, as well as the lack of clarity about the role the Home Office should play in the new policing landscape. We, the Commission, made a clear recommendation that change is absolutely essential. We stated we believe that there be three serious options for change that should be the subject of a wide-ranging consultation process, and they are as follows. The first, locally negotiated mergers and voluntary collaboration agreements. When I was here as Deputy Chief Constable a long, long time ago, we were talking about amalgamating Suffolk, Cambridgeshire, Norfolk. When I was Chief Constable Northumbria, we talked about Northumbria, big, large force, amalgamating with Durham. These things have been talked about in the ether for a long time now. If you want to take that forward, take it forward. And Charles Clarke marched the army to the top of the tree. I love Charles, he's a great guy, but had to march them down again because of ACPO resistance. Big mistake from ACPO. That's the first. The second way of dealing with it would be a coordinated amalgamation into approximately 10 regional forces. The third, the creation of a national police service. Interestingly enough, none of the political parties, I've seen them, certainly not Labour, certainly not Lib Dem, want a national police service. If Yvette Cooper was here, and I'm sure I can speak, not on her behalf, but she would say you're putting too much power into the hands of one particular agency. Others, Conservatives, Lib Dems, some on the committee, some actually from Harvard and from, we had two commissioners for the NYPD on the commission, said be very, very careful about creating a national police service. Most people seem to come along with a view of a compromise, a gradual work towards 10 regional forces. Not all at once, but gradually work towards that. And there are, and the Chief Inspector of Constabulary has actually put out a paper, not the present one, the one before, where he has stated there would be considerable savings if in fact there were amalgamation of forces. But remember what I said earlier. The Commission was adamant that if you amalgamate forces, yes, do that, but the most important thing is keep your core policing in place. So you have a police chief for Cambridge, you bring that down to district level, down to ward level, but keep that in place. Nobody said that you shouldn't do that. Now, during the course of our work, we encountered wide consensus regarding the poor state of police equipment and technology and the inefficiencies of existing procurement processes, notably for IT and forensic science. We, the Commission, were disheartened and dismayed by the recurring criticisms of the police service's inability to rationalise its procurement, and we were greatly exercised by problems besetting the Forensic Science Service. That's very serious. In my time as a senior detective, I used to go into a murder scene or whatever, have a sniff around, see what was going on, look at the documentation. If you were lucky, you'd get a sample of blood that big you needed for DNA. The whole thing has changed now. The senior investigator on any crime keeps out of the way and allows the forensics to go in and do their work. And sometimes that work will take 2 to 3 to 4 days. And you can get a speck of blood you can't see where you can get DNA. On the Diana inquiry, we brought the car back from Paris, went right through that car, and the cleverness of the DNA and forensic work, we were able to prove categorically through blood samples that Diana was not pregnant. You remember that was one of the allegations. That's how clever forensic science is at the moment. And I've been on LGC's board, that government chemist, lead in forensic, genomics and the rest of it. And the pace of change in terms of forensic is absolutely astronomical. But the police service, is the police service actually using that to great advantage? We were worried that it was not. We think, the Commission thinks, that urgent attention to be given to ensuring the quality of forensic service provision meets operational requirements, thereby avoiding current and future problems. All of us accepted that the police budget will have to be cut, 20% this year, another 6% next year. And there has to be a strong central steer to make savings. But we think it would force many police services to increase the range of policing services, and they're looking to outsource things when we do not think that that is in the service's interest. We also noted there was a great opportunity for the police service to achieve greater integration and interoperability of intelligence and improved means of communication with an imminent new generation of procurement contracts, including the Police National Computer. We considered that procurement was deficient. We considered that best practice in terms of the private sector was not being used in terms of procurement. And the continued failure to manage procurement is not only costly in economic terms and wasteful of human effort, but it potentially compromises the efficiency and effectiveness of investigation and other policing tasks. We therefore recommended that a national procurement strategy, coordinated jointly by the Ministry of Justice and the Home Office for IT non-consumables and forensic service, is developed to secure integration, common standards and value for money. Now, I spent my career working in the police service. And I'll tell you what, I make no secret of being a passionate advocate for the British model of policing by consent. I also make no excuses for saying that the model we've got is not broken. I was amazed talking to members from the Harvard Business School on the Commission and others over in the States, where I do business, and saw those people here, and all of us worked on this commission for no money at all, pro bono. Extraordinary, isn't it? Maybe mad, but that's how it was, and we loved what we were doing. We believed in what we were doing. And I remember vividly a very distinguished professor from the Harvard Business School, who was actually one of Obama's advisors, together with an ex-commissioner of the NYPD and another lady who was the first woman commissioner of Boston and on the patent, magnificent woman, and was, in fact, Inspector General of Garda, the 3 or 4 of them, saying, "What's the matter with you over there?" I said, "What do you mean? Why are you beating yourself up so much?" I said, "Because that's the way it is. That's how we do things over here in England." And they said, "Your model of policing is still an example of best practice. Yes, it needs changing. Yes, it needs reforming. Yes, it needs modernising. But the basis of it, in our view, is that that is an outstanding model." And those people were on the commission, and that's what they said. Now, I was delighted, as were the Commission, when the Labour Party welcomed our conclusions and assured us they would be the cornerstone of their policing policy. In fact, some people have been very kind, I'm not so sure it's the case, when they said what we did was better than the Royal Commission. It's also very heartwarming to see that whilst the government may not have been quite so welcoming of our report, you can understand that. This was commissioned by Yvette Cooper, although when she commissioned it, she said, let's make it cross-party, but for all sorts of reasons, which you can understand, that wasn't accepted by the government. Several of our findings have been noted, with elements already having been acted upon and such measures to address disproportionate disproportionate use of stop and search. In addition, Jack Dromey, the Shadow Home Secretary and Policing Minister, has been running around the country for the last 9 months looking and talking to consultative groups, taking them through all of this quite complex amount of work. And he came back, and I saw him about 3 to 4 months ago, and he said, you wouldn't believe how everybody more or less agrees with these conclusions. I said, well, Jack, it's very easy for you to say that, coming from the Labour Party. He said, no, go and speak to someone in the House of Lords, and I went over there and did that, who'd been with him on 1 or 2 occasions. What I would say is this, that it is vastly important that we keep our model going back to the Pillion Principles, yes. But it is also vastly important that we move on in a way that I've outlined. There has never ever been a getting together of so many people on a commission of different and varying expertise. There has never been 28 universities around the world who've actually presented papers and been part and parcel of what has taken place. It hasn't happened before, unless, certainly not in relation to policing. And the other thing, which I think we're all delighted about, is this. We all came to unanimous agreement on the recommendations. And that wasn't because I pushed drink down their throats, I'm going to show you. It was because we think and believe these are common sense recommendations. And I hope, who knows, that this will stand the test of time. But one thing's for sure, it will find itself into manifestos in some form or another. One manifesto, the whole lot will go in, and that pledge was given by Mr. Miliband and Yvette Cooper the day this came out, and they'd seen previously the documentation 2 to 3 days before. And I believe the government have taken up some of these issues. You cannot possibly expect the government to say on something the Shadow Home Secretary has brought out that we take this in lock, stock and barrel. That is not how politics works. Well, there you have it. You've been extremely patient. I've just run 4 minutes over my time. I look around the audience and I see some old friends there, and it's a delight to see you here. But thank you so much for inviting me here this evening. Thank you so much for listening to me. It's amazing to see that you're still with me, and you are. So thank you.